Tyler. Well, May is National Photography Month, and living here in the Northwoods means that there are plenty of beautiful nature photography opportunities. Local blogger and photographer Kristen Carlson from Miss Northerner shows us some of her tips to take some beautiful photos.
Hi, my name is Kristen. I'm a local photographer and blogger here in the Northwoods, and this morning I wanted to give a few basic photography tips. Now these tips aren't going to be about the exposure triangle and aperture, shutter speed, ISO. These are going to be more tips that I've just learned throughout the years and have really helped me with my photography. So tip number one is to just keep practicing and just keep shooting. When I first started out, I read the camera manual, I watched a lot of YouTube tutorials, but what ultimately helped me the most was just trial and error. So it's just switching over to manual mode instead of automatic and kind of forcing myself to play around with it and learn that way. Tip number two is that light is key. So I'm sure you've heard the phrase golden hour. Shooting around sunrise and sunset are going to give you some really gorgeous images. And there's also something called blue hour, which is right after the sun sets and you kind of get that bluish glow. Tip number three is to take advantage of the weather when you have it. So what I mean by this is that there's been plenty of times when I've had really gorgeous conditions and I've kind of kicked myself for not going out and shooting. So just taking advantage of those. So if you wake up and there's fog, really thick fog rolling across the lake in the morning, or if it's winter time and the trees are all really frosted, you never know when that situation is gonna occur again. So kind of just taking advantage of it when you have it. Tip number four is to just be aware of your surroundings. I know a lot of people say, that person has an eye for photography. I think there's definitely some truth in that, but I think it's also, being aware of your surroundings, kind of being in the moment, looking around and kind of picturing a scene in your mind. I think the more you just kind of slow down and do that, the more you'll get comfortable with it. Next tip is that there will be days when you come away with nothing. There's been plenty of times when I've gone out shooting and I kind of come up empty-handed, and that's okay. It's going to happen a lot. And honestly, I'm super happy if I go out and I come home with one really good photo that I'm really proud of. Tip number six is to shoot in RAW versus JPEG. I personally shoot in RAW, and this is something that you can change right in your camera settings. So what's happening when you shoot in JPEG is that your camera is applying little tweaks to your image within your camera. So it might add something like contrast or sharpening, whereas when you shoot in RAW, nothing's added to it, and it's kind of like a blank slate. So if you want full control over your image and you want to be able to edit your image, then I would definitely suggest shooting in RAW. Next tip is to turn on grid lines, and this can apply to both your phone and your DSLR. This will just really help you especially if you're looking at your phone and you have those lines, it'll help you line up the horizon and make sure your photo is straight. The next tip is to clean your lens. This is kind of a simple one, but I think something that can get overlooked, especially with your phone going in and out of your pocket, in and out of your purse, just making sure you're constantly cleaning it because it'll make a huge difference. And then lastly is to just know how to properly hold your camera. So instead of having your hand over the lens like that, just making sure it's underneath and your arms are tucked in. This will really help you make sure your camera is stable when you're shooting. So those are my tips. I really hope you found these useful, and thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Kristen. We appreciate it, and certainly inspiring to go ahead and get out and start shooting.